Some people have asked me, why do I need to meditate? What is the benefit of me meditating in this way? And even for some of us who have been contemplating these matters for a long time or have been meditating for a long time, it's important to understand what actually is taking place in this understanding that we call meditation. Again, in my method, meditation is a byproduct, a fruit of an understanding that takes place when we investigate the nature of who we are. What is the meaning of I? So when we go straight into the question, who am I? And we explore this to its foundation, then we find that there is a contemplation or an understanding that happens of our true nature. And through that is that what we call meditation happens. In other words, meditation, again, is a byproduct of a desire to understand who we are, a desire to not just understand intellectually, but actually allow it to settle, to sink in to the heart of who we are. So what would inevitably happen, and that everybody would agree that they want more in their lives, is what I call harmony. Simple. I like the word harmony because it means that regardless of what is happening out there, if we are in harmony with everything, it means that we are not rigid, we're not stuck to a particular frequency, as sometimes it is called, right? You're just simply modulated and adapted to anything. You are in harmony with everything. And because we have experienced too much this harmony in our lives, then we feel like we want to be that malleable. We want to be adaptable. And that is, to me, the word that describes what everybody wants. Now, how does this happen? How is this reflected? I'm going to share with you what I have found in my own experience. And there are two things that begin to shine more in our felt experience in our lives in general. And this is what I would break down into two fundamental aspects of what comes out of this harmonious understanding of who we are. And that is truth, living more in truth, and beauty, appreciating life more through beauty. Now, I'm going to explain why I see these two as another byproduct of this meditation, of this understanding, as it sinks into the heart of who we are. And then we're going to do a short meditation to see how this arises spontaneously through this understanding. To speak about truth, what I mean is that our lives that are lived by truth, they are unwavering. They are in full certainty. There is no doubt. There is no confusion. There is just pure clarity in terms of the actions that we have to take. And we take them regardless of what the consequence is going to be, because we know that we're acting through truth. So it's very important to understand that at the heart of our being, we want to always act in a way that feels absolutely congruent without any doubts as to who we are. So you can begin to see how understanding and letting that understanding sink into the heart of our being of what we are will allow this living through truth to happen spontaneously. In other words, what used to cause confusion or uncertainty in what I should be doing or shouldn't be doing, it's no longer there, because we have a frame of reference, if you will, that is foundational, that is solid, that it never will falter under our feet, and it always sustains us. That is living through truth. Everybody wants this. Everyone wants to feel this solid foundation in their lives. And I mean this mentally, to know that every action, everything that we do, every relationship that we engage in is based on truth. And it's something that always feels great. It feels that it is virtuous. Yes, it doesn't have to be right or wrong. In fact, right or wrong doesn't exist anymore here. It is just what needs to be done. And I talk a lot about this because this is what we call right action in Buddhism, right? So now, on the other side, there's beauty. It's not only about having a very absolute foundation of life, but also appreciating that life in general. So that appreciation that we call beauty begins to arise also as how we perceive everything. In contrast to this, there are things that we may not agree with, that we may feel like it's improper or that it shouldn't be happening. In other words, we don't see the beauty in the world, in the universe in general sometimes. It depends on the philosophy that has been bought and reinforced over time. But because of that, there is a little sad part of ourselves that feels like things should be different. But in this understanding, from the absolute understanding of who we are, beauty arises naturally, because beauty is just the appreciation of what is for no reason at all. No reason at all. There is no expectation of it. The best example that we all have is nature. Nature doesn't have a right or wrong environment. It doesn't have something more beautiful than the other. We may have preferences. I tend to like the forest a lot, and not so much the swamp. But is there less beauty in the swamp? Maybe for my mind that has a preference, it is. And this is why we don't have to agree, right? We don't have to be engaged in things that are dislikable by our mind, but we can still see the beauty. That is the real crux of it. When you can see beauty despite not wanting to engage with that because it is not what goes with you, right? Then you can say that you have unconditional view of beauty. That is what's also taking place in this understanding of who we are. And again, I like to emphasize this because there's the question that says, am I going to see beauty in war? Am I going to see beauty in exploitation and dominations and all the terrible things that are happening out in the world? We don't have to engage in that. We don't have to agree with all of this and yet see the beauty of it, just like we see the beauty in the swamp. Even though I'm not going to engage and submerge myself in the swamp and live there and expose my naked body to it like I would to maybe a Caribbean beach or some other place where it feels more conducive to my well-being. So there is still an appreciation of beauty, of why that is the way it is, and yet not a need to engage or be part of, actually. So these two, to me, reflect what has been a change, an ongoing change that continues to be reinforced over this foundation, on top of this understanding, which takes place, again, once we decide to explore exclusively and absolutely the nature of our being. So to do a little bit of this exploration, if you want to close your eyes with me, let your attention simply sink into the knowledge of being. Not the knowledge of being anything defined by the body and sensations that make up the body, or thoughts and images that may be arising about you, but actually being itself. In other words, you know that you are. How do you know that you are? What gives you certainty that you are? It's not a thought. A thought may try to define it and say, because I am. But after that, because I am, what remains? You. This is not a deep understanding. This is not an advanced knowledge or wisdom. It is a knowledge that everybody has, and it's simply bypassed by thoughts and the feeling of a body. Notice this knowledge of being as awareness of body and mind. Notice that even though the body and the mind fluctuate, change, move, and they're never static, they are impermanent. The awareness of it doesn't share the same qualities. Awareness of body and mind is static, still, permanent. Notice that you don't come and go with the thought. Notice that you do not change with the feelings of the body. In other words, you are always present. And I repeat, this is not some profound understanding. This is not a deep knowledge. This is the knowledge of being as everybody knows it. We're simply exploring our identity as that which is unchanging. Realize that all sensations of the body, as well as thoughts and images, are dependent on the awareness of it. And yet, awareness does not depend on them to be. It's a marvelous realization. Awareness is like the space in which objects appear and into which objects disappear. It doesn't depend on the objects, but objects depend on space. You do not depend on body and mind, but the body and the mind depend on you. Actually, the body and the mind are simply a movement of you. Temporary, always changing. That's the playfulness of reality. This being true, realize that anything that appears in this field of awareness that is you is, again, not independent. The room where you're in, the country, the planet, the universe itself appears in this field of awareness that is not limited by your mind or your body. It's the same field of awareness that we all share, into which we all appear and disappear. Don't believe my words. Don't take them for granted. Don't imagine them. Feel them. Realize them. Practice true skepticism. Question. Corroborate, and let that understanding sink into your heart of being. You can open your eyes now, and I want you to contemplate that if this is true and you can validate this over and over again, then what would be the basis for feeling that we are a separate individual in a universe, in a world, in a country, in a space? There seems to be no basis for this. In other words, there is no evidence of us being a separate self, a separate being. And if that's true, then how would our relationship and our actions to the world would change? Meaning, how would we act in a world that is created within me, and that this body and mind is a necessary vehicle to explore the multiplicity of things that have been created within this same field of awareness by me and for me? How would our actions change? How would they be congruent with this understanding? And at the same time, what would they ask us to do? What would they ask us to not do? And this is the basis for how this understanding takes root. Many things have been written about proper behavior and conduct, right action, I even mentioned in this video. Don't let any of that interfere with this understanding that is taking place. Allow this understanding to inform your mind to see if it is congruent, if your actions, your thoughts, especially how you think about yourself, we always have to start with that. How do we think about ourselves? Are my thoughts congruent with this, or are they reinforcing the idea that I am a victim, that I'm a separate self, that I am responsible for this and I should be accountable for that and I should be doing more of this and less of that? I. Who is this I? Let all of this sink in. There is no other way but to allow all of this to be filtered through this understanding and see if it is congruent. This will inevitably, again, produce more actions, more thoughts, and more behaviors that are congruent with us, our true being, in manifestation, in this reality, in existence, in relationship, and everything will just come naturally. This is what I call spontaneity of being, where authenticity simply shines without us having to work it out or think about it or try to reach a specific state, but just simply allow that which is already in to manifest the way it wants to be. This is the clarity, this is the certainty with which we begin to live, not because we read it, not because we learned it from somewhere else, but because we hear it as congruency with this understanding. In the same way, when we look at the universe now, at form in general, at the shapes of reality, how can we not see beauty? And this is beauty that is unconditional. Again, just like we see nature unconditionally and say, even though I may not like the swamp, I appreciate its beauty. It's gorgeous, right? There is a beauty there. We may not have to use this word if it's not congruent with our language, but it is an appreciation. It is a gratitude that this exists, this is. And just by it being itself, it's beautiful. This relationship, this view of reality this way is something that, again, we have read countless times. We have seen it in all kinds of expressions. I would say do not let that interfere, if anything, to inspire, but allow this to arise naturally in your understanding. Don't expect it. Don't work towards it. Just simply allow it to be something that grows naturally and begin to see it more. Begin to notice when it happens, because there's a shift happening into how we used to be conditional about things should be this way, because right now they're ugly. Right? We use that term when we say reality is very ugly right now. Things are getting ugly because we don't see the beauty in it, because we're kind of polarized. We're still trying to be congruent with the idea of a separate self and other separate selves, and everybody on their own, everybody for themselves, we would say. And that's not the case. We're all appearing in the same field of consciousness that we are, the same field of awareness that we are, and gradually disappearing into it too. We can see it in our meditation. It's happening all the time, appearance and disappearance. The beauty stands out as to how consistent this can be for a time that we call life, and to appreciate that life for what it is, in the way it is, without any expectations or conditions. This is just how things arise in me as I go through this understanding myself. And I see it everywhere else in people that have devoted some time of their day to allow this understanding to happen, to sink into the heart of being, and to see the results of it. And the results are always that there is a greater clarity in terms of our actions and what we do and how we relate with the world. And also there is a huge shift that happens in how we perceive the world, how the world appears to us, and how we appreciate it as beauty. It's the best two words that I can find to group up this harmony that is what we're all seeking, and that everybody would agree that they want more. Greater harmony with themselves, their inner world, and with others or the outer world. I hope this video was helpful to incentivize even more this natural sitting that should happen every day in ourselves, in love with a practice that you can enjoy doing, which is what we call meditation. If we can begin with this understanding and allow that to be just part of the moment in which we sit, then it'll gradually evolve as a love for this understanding, this knowledge of who we are beyond the person. If you want to know more about this and you have questions, you can either use the comment section here on YouTube, or better yet, the free community that I have on Skool, where you can join. I post there all the time, and there are some events so you can get involved and go deeper. There are some free courses available, everything to nourish this knowledge and this practice that we call meditation, that I like to call effortless meditation, as a byproduct of this understanding that takes place when we seek ourselves directly into who we are. Hope you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you in the next video.